Hello, my Logic friends. Happy Sunday. It is Logic Live 153, and it's a beautiful day. And there's already some people in the chat. Hello, Yan. Happy Sunday. Carlos Villa. Hello. Michael Landon. Hello. Great to see our friendly faces here on a beautiful Logic Live Sunday. Here we go. Brian Bailey's in the house. Hello. I was just thinking of you for reasons. I'm making a type video. The words secrets out. Mark Wellington, hello. We have a great show today, everybody. Some wonderful guests, some wonderful content. Hope you're all ready for it. I'm ready for it. Are you ready for it? Am I ready for this transition? Who knows? We're about to find out. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Logic Live, episode 153. We have a wonderful show in store, but before we dive into the specifics, we have just a couple of quick announcements, so stay tuned. What is our first announcement, you ask? It is that Flame 2026.2 is here as of not too long ago, just a few weeks ago. And if you missed last week's show, take a peek because the Flame development team was right here live to talk about all the latest and greatest in our favorite application. And between then and now, they have released 2 new tutorials on the Flame Learning channel covering the snapshot feature, as well as some changes to the way project management works. So give that a look if you are interested. And I happen to have some special inside knowledge that there are a handful of other tutorials on the way. So be on the lookout for those when they go live. But for now, we are shifting gears over to another incredible software that is near and dear to some of our hearts. That is Silhouette, which is considered to be the industry standard for paint and roto, used by the most reputable sources out there. And 2025.5 came out earlier this year. And today on our show, we have 2 people who are very close to Silhouette, and they are here to talk about the latest and greatest and what's come out. Let's introduce them live right now. Hello, Christoph, and hello, Paul Miller.
Hey, Jeff.
Welcome to Logic Live.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for being here. Christoph, many of you might recognize him as not only as a Logic community member and FX PhD tutorial creator, but he is also now in his new role as a product specialist at BorisFX, and it is wonderful to see you. So some of us might recognize you, but some of us might not recognize you, Paul Miller, as the, what is it? It's the lead developer of Silhouette and software architect. I think I saw someone mention to me that you are. That's a pretty cool title.
It sounds cool.
It sure does.
It doesn't mean a whole lot, but
well, yeah. I mean, you've been there since the beginning, but I guess since we might know a little bit more about Christoph and his background, maybe you could take a minute just to introduce yourself and talk about like what you're doing at Boris and how you got there, maybe, and so just to give the people an idea of who you are.
Sure. Yeah. I kind of landed into the world of digital visual effects right at the beginning in the early 90s. My first commercial product was a morphing program called Elastic Reality, which became a pretty household name rotoscoping tool later in the 90s. Then after I left Avid, I started a company doing plugins, and then I hooked up with some former coworkers from Avid, and we formed Silhouette. And Silhouette just turned 21. We started writing that in 2004, and it's been working on it ever since.
That's amazing. That is a long running program, and you've been there since the beginning, which is incredible. And we're very fortunate to have you here. So I think the game plan for today is Christoph is going to show off some of the. Oh my! I think. You know what I did? I think I must have, while we were prepping, I must have accidentally made it so whenever I switch to that view, it does a drum roll. Yeah.
It's appropriate.
Okay. I know what I'm doing. Maybe once I've done 100 of these like Andy has, maybe I won't make mistakes like that. But I'll figure out how to figure out how to undo that in a minute. But anyway, the agenda today is Christoph is going to be showing us what's new in Silhouette, and Paul will be here to answer some of the more technical questions, if any pop up. But before we move on, I have to remind you all that if you didn't see the email, if you didn't see the LinkedIn posts that I made, quick reminder that we are, by the end of the show, giving away a year subscription to Silhouette, standalone and plugin, which is an $875 value. You just have to register for the show, and you have to be here when we're giving it away. It's one of those big prizes you have to be here for. So stick around if you're interested in that. We're going to pick a name at the end, and hopefully you win. But until then, let's take a look at what you have to show us, Christoph. I have your screen up right here.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. So yeah, you talked about the game plan. So my game plan would be, because probably not everybody is familiar with the Silhouette and how some of the more specific concepts work, I'll do a very brief overview of the core elements and maybe a little bit of the heritage of Silhouette, because I'm going to take you on a dive into Paint and Roto, which are like the hallmarks of Silhouette. And once we're done with that, we'll get into all the fancy new features of 2025.5. So yeah, if that's all right, I'll quickly dive in. Some of the examples, by the way, you might know from the Logic Academy Pro Masterclass that we did a couple of months ago in Amsterdam, but I'll always try to pepper in something new when we get to those, so stay tuned. All right, so very first example is this lovely lady here, and I picked this shot just to illustrate how we do paint inside of Silhouette. Now, I would not suggest that a flame artist who's very comfortable with paint in flame would switch out that for Silhouette, but there are cases like very complex paint jobs. The flame paint node tends to get sluggish because it's vector-based and ours is raster-based. So there's a difference that if you're comfortable with both paint nodes, then that might be something to consider. Okay, so I'm going to pull up a fresh node. And as you know, Silhouette runs as a standalone version as well as an OFX plugin. So let's get a fresh one and open up the Silhouette interface. And I mean, we're among flame artists here, so you all know node-based compositing. But in case you don't want to mess around too much with the nodes, we've got a couple of presets here for you. So if you want to do, for example, paint work like we're going to do there is a preset to choose from, and we're going to create a project. Now, once we do a paint job, we actually need to specify a save file for that. The paint node is, as far as I know, the only instance where we need to do that. Everything else gets saved the way like it does with Mocha as a plugin, but the paint files can get a little bit more heavy, and that's why we need to save them away separately. So I'm going to call this Logic Live Silhouette and save that away. And then we get a preset, and that contains a roto node and a paint node. So the roto node is important because a core idea of not only paint, but a lot of stuff that we do inside of Silhouette is that we stabilize parts of the image we want to work on first. And that's done by the roto node. And I'll get into this into a little bit more detail later on, I want to point out this little yellow connection here. I'll, as I said, tease now, I'll explain later. And I can pick any of my splines. So we've got B splines, we've got X splines, and of course, Beziers like in the GMass tracer, but I'm going to go with an X spline. Here, draw that up. Just going to stabilize the cheek. And to stabilize, I go to the tracker module, and there I can either choose to use a point tracker, use the traditional Silhouette planar tracker like that, or the Mocha tracker. And I'm going to use the Mocha tracker. I could also use optical flow to stabilize that. For very organic stabilizers, that might be something quite nice. And then I'm going to stabilize away.
And Christoph, I just want to highlight, and I'm sure you're about to highlight, maybe you're about to highlight this, but as a flame artist, we're not this concept is not foreign to us, that's for sure. And many of us in the chat are talking about how we love Mocha, for example. But it is pretty unique that you have a tracker that has the power of Mocha just as another tab without having to go into Mocha. That's pretty special to me.
That's yeah, and that's gonna be interesting for two reasons. Firstly, we also get examples where we delve into the dedicated Mocha Pro node, which is part of Silhouette. And also with the latest version of Silhouette, we also got the same functionality with SynthEyes 3D tracking. So we've got a kind of a baby version of SynthEyes built right into Silhouette. So more of that coming. So now I tracked that, and to view that, let me just pull up my layer list here and rename this to cheeks so that we know what everybody's talking about. And let me enable the viewer stabilization. And there I can pick my cheek layer. And then just the viewer is stabilized. Think of this like a LUT for your transforms. It's not a committing this transform to any filtering. It's just a stabilization on the viewer. And that's really important for what we're going to do next. I'm going to switch the stabilize off for now. And I'm going to go to the paint node and let's pick up our clone brush. I'm going to make that a little bit larger. Pick an offset. Zoom in here. Just do a very sloppy job on removing those molds. I want to highlight we've got frequency separation right built into the paint node. So I can call up a frequency layer here, and I can decide how much detail I want to actually have there. I can switch between the color layer and the detail layer. And what's really fun is I can paint on one while viewing the result. So this is me viewing the result layer, but having detail selected down here, I can now go in, let's make that a little bit smaller, and just paint on the detail. So without setting up a huge node tree with mathematical operations or anything, or a separate frequency separation and divides and multiplies. And what I find really neat about that is that you have it if you need it. It's not like you have to pre-think the shot too much. What do you want to do? But you can just on the fly switch on that feature and be done with it. So once, let's say I would have done a good job here, which I definitely did not, I can then go down here and select my cheek layer and tell this history of strokes, which currently just live on the very first frame, to match move to that layer and commit that. Now, Silhouette will take a short moment to paint these strokes among all the frames. But what's interesting about this is that the whole transformation, the stabilization and then the inversion are happening before the paint stroke is actually committed to the picture. And that means we've got no filtering. And that's really, really in regards to quality. And if you think about that, Silhouette is also used quite a lot with retouching and prep work, then this is really a really nifty feature.
Yeah, I mean that's a sensitive subject to a lot of flame artists out there who care deeply about not getting a second filter hit, and so that's a pretty special, another special feature in Silhouette.
Yeah.
While this is rendering,
be,
oh sorry, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sorry. And I just want to be honest about this because it is a different way of thinking about paint. It is a little bit of a learning curve to it, so it took me a couple of days to get my head around that. But once you got it, it can be pretty awesome, and the quality is really nice.
Yeah, definitely. So, but as with anything, it takes a little bit of getting used to. And that finished tracking, and that looks pretty good, and no filtering hit.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's quite
there's a
nice.
there's kind
So,
of a big picture discussion going on in the chat that I would love to pose to you if that's okay, Christoph. And it's
sure.
someone wanted to know, like, big picture wise, why they would want to get Silhouette instead of Mocha. They're wondering which one they should get. And I think
Okay.
I would love your perspective because it's a tough one because I think they do different things. It's like Mocha's a little bit more
Yeah.
dedicated as a tracker. Silhouette has Mocha in it, but can you do everything that you can do in Mocha in Silhouette? I wanted to know your take on that.
Well, you've got the Mocha Pro node in there, and I would say if you can probably do everything apart from the direct output. So if you've got a Mocha Pro node as an OverX plugin inside of Flame, and you can, for example, do a power mesh and unwarp that directly out of the plugin without rendering. So that's something you couldn't do with the Mocha Pro node inside of Silhouette, then running inside of Flame. Apart from that, I think you're pretty well set up. But I think also this is not really a neither nor proposition. So firstly, I think if you're mainly doing tracking work and you just go into Mocha to get a track and then use that inside of Flame, then you're far better off with the with the Mocha Pro plugin. If you do a lot of paint work yourself, or if you want to have access to certain machine learning tools, because Silhouette is also kind of our, I don't want to say test bed, but all of our ML tools go into Silhouette first. So if you want access to those, that might be something worth considering. And also, where it really is powerful is if you work a lot with overseas contractors that do a lot of your rotor work, and you want to be able to fix those quickly inside your Flame session, then Silhouette might be worth considering because they'll most probably work with Silhouette as well and can send over a Silhouette file, and then you can do those last minute adjustments on the fly. So I think there are pros and cons to both.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that would be my hot take on it.
Yeah, thank you for that. And we can also like expand upon that in the Q&A afterwards, and that could be a good like little topic of discussion. But thank you. Thanks for that.
Sure. Sure, but that also is a good transition to my next shot because that's going to be Roto, and I'm going to keep that quickly. But and once again, usual disclaimer: I don't want to convince anybody to move away from the GMAS tracer because I think that's a great Roto tool. But there are a couple of things that Silhouette does differently, and those are maybe worth exploring. So once again, this, of course, uses the whole stabilization concept, which makes a lot of sense with Roto. So if we take a look at this shot, which is like the usual Roto nightmare you might find yourself in, then you'll see if we take a look at the humongous object list here, that all of these are broken down into individual layers, and those are all stabilized to the viewer. So if I go to hair top, for example, and play that back, then that will stick to that. So that's always the first step in such a process is you stabilize the part that you want to roto, and then you do all the granular work. But let me switch over to a work in progress version of that roto. A little less shapes and also not wholly finished. So let's take a closer look at that yellow guy over here. And I mean, everybody who's done some serious roto knows that you want to avoid wiggly shapes as much as possible and to touch the individual points if not necessary. So what I really like is the ability to weigh your keyframes. So we've got this this animation between 2 points here. So it looks good on the end, looks good in the beginning, but in the middle it just drifts off. So what I can do is I can hit Alt K on my keyboard and then just weigh this keyframe. So basically like rubber banding it between its beginning and its end position. So that's something where I think can do the same thing here, which gives you just this. Okay, this wouldn't do. This little bit more control over how the shape gets transformed without messing it up too much. If in a case like this where you can't move it there completely, we can go to the brush reshape tool and just pick up a couple of points and move them proportionally to each other, which is also quite nice to have smoother adjustment between keyframes. So two options that I like. And also, and I'll not go into that into too much detail, but you can see that Silhouette is really good with open splines, which is a godsend for hair roto. So
Yeah, I was
yeah.
really
But,
amazed to see all those. They remind me of like normals that appear. They're like handles that appear on the open spline there when you hover over it with that
yeah,
brush. Very interesting.
yeah, and also there's a lot in there which is really, if you are really deep into rotor, is interesting, like inverse kinematics. So you have dependencies between the movement of the shape, which makes rotor a lot easier. So it's really worth exploring. As I said, once again, not a replacement for the GMAS tracer. That would be total overkill, but maybe a nice addition. And also, I just wanted to show these two because next, we'll get into the AI ML stuff. And the neat thing about having a node-based compositor inside your node-based compositor, which sounds a little bit like overkill, is that you can combine the AI tools with traditional tools like these ones, and that will probably give you better results. So with that out of the way, let's move on over. I said, let's move on over. Thank you. To our first AI example. So this is an easy one, if Flame lets me. Thank you very much. So we're gonna do a little bit of a depth map, and I know we got one inside of Flame, but I think this offers a little bit more control. So let's open that up. And I'm going to start a fresh project. So click composite. And just if you have a trial of Silhouette running, or if you have it available, we've got all the nodes that are available down in our tabs right here. So if you want to play around, they are sorted out. But we're going to mainly spend the next couple of examples in this area here, which is the AI ML category. So then we've got depth map ML. And the reason I wanted to show this to you is, firstly, what we like to do is we like to have multiple models available for you to choose from. So first idea is, of course, speed versus precision. So you can choose the better or the faster model. But you'll also see with another example later on that we actually do iterate on these. So with the denoiser, we are at version 3.0, I think, right now. So we'll never change an existing model, but we'll rather introduce a new one. And then you can still go to the old one if you need to open up an old setup, or if you just like the quality better of the old version. So just wanted to point that out first. And then maybe I should have cached this while I was blabbering on. But yeah, here we go. So you'll see, of course, it has got the usual temporal inconsistencies, but I would say it is not too bad for depth map. And also, nice little party trick down here is a 3D visualization of what
Oh,
actually the
that
depth map
looks
will look like.
incredible.
It's quite nice. And let me just stop this because then we can play around with it, which is more fun. So you see, if I adjust the near and far, that's pretty cool.
That looks really cool.
And what's also nice, and I'm coming back to the little yellow input here. I mentioned that before, teased that before. What that is a data input, and we'll utilize that a little bit later on. But what you could do is you could add tracking information to that data port. And that would be really cool because we can not only use the scaling as a mapping, which we did until now, but we can define points. So we can tell Silhouette exactly, this is supposed to be far, this is supposed to be near. And if you had a very fast moving or complex shot, you could link those to trackers to produce a more appropriate depth map. So that can be really, and you can also hand animate those. So if you have, for example, somebody swinging a bat or something, and you want to have like that really upfront and focused, then you can hand animate the little point with that bat, just to illustrate the point. But these could be, and these are animatable and they are linkable to trackers, and that's quite nice. So that's just a little entry level on our machine learning tools. We'll get into a little bit more complex one later on, or up as a next example. What I do want to say is, like with Flame, those are readily trained models. They are ethically trained and all on our own material, and you will never use any of your footage to train our models. So we could totally air gap my computer, would make for a short show, but the model would still work. So that's possible. Okay, moving on. So the next one is FaceML. And I know Flame has had that for a couple of years. And to be completely honest, I think in regards to the amount of detail you can select, the Flame one is actually better. But I think in regards to temporal consistency, this is quite a nice alternative. Maybe.
Well, the Flame one hasn't been updated in a little while, so it's nice to have a maybe more fresh
exactly.
one.
So let's take a look. So I'm going to start with the compositing and going to call up FaceML. So, and down here, you got the selection of what you want. So you can select the eyebrows, the eyes, the lip, the mouth. That means the inside of the mouth and the teeth. The teeth we can, in this example, see at the very end just a little bit. If I turn off the lips, should get a very little blue line here, but yeah, negligible. What's fun about this is, once again, the yellow data output. Why? Because we can hook that up to a cryptomat. And something like that. And then I can just select the ones that are, shift select it is, select the ones that I need. And little caveat before anybody gets too excited, I played around with this before the show. Currently, it is not possible to render this out as a cryptomat straight into Flame. It's got something to do with the limitations of the Flame cryptomat node, who needs like a certain amount of ranks in there. But yeah, maybe this is something we hopefully both with Autodesk can figure out in the future. But it would be nice to just get a cryptomat out of this. But it still allows for a very nice workflow in here, or maybe with other applications. And also think about that something like this could be scriptable via Python, so that you could, for example, go in there on a headless silhouette, just tell it to isolate the eyebrows and the lips of 50 shots and render out cryptomats for that. So
that's great.
And
I assume you can get at least the matte to output from Silhouette.
Sure,
so you can use,
sure. So
that plays really well with some of the new features that Flame's got, where like in the timeline, for example, if you're grading in the timeline, you can just go into Batch Effects, get a AI matte through Silhouette, pipe that out of the batch effects and straight into the image node in the timeline. For grading, this is a big deal.
Sure. Sure. So if we close that, I hope Flame doesn't crash on me. There we are.
There it is.
So
that's great.
And that could be that, as it is an OFX plugin. This could be living on the timeline. It could be living in batch effects. It can be living in batch. That's no problem.
That's great. On that same note, we do have one question that's come in, and it's that:
Sure.
Is it possible to add more areas of the face, like nose, ears, neck, eyes? I don't know if that was part of the selection. I couldn't see, but
let's call up the current one, and let me also say we already got wish lists from Flame artists on what they would love to see in there. Very detailed wish lists. No, nose is not yet a part of that, but yeah, we think there can be more. I think if we pull up this window, there's still room for some more.
Yeah. And just going back to depth, I know that it looks like Maury had a question about alternative ways of using the depth. Although I think his use case is maybe a little bit complicated. He wants to know if it's possible to use a track to hold depth to increase temporal. Is there any way to increase the temporal consistency by using tracking with the depth map that you know of? I guess maybe this is something we can dive into in the Q&A later. But
as a short answer, I would say if you have a moving object, and if you track like the front and the back indicator, like I've shown, I think you'll most definitely get a more consistent depth map than using the scale alone.
Cool. Yeah, and that's something we can play with during the Q&A. Maybe we'll save that for a little demo there.
Sure.
But good question.
Sure.
Thanks, Maury. And thanks for the answer.
All right. So just to show a little bit more of a complicated example on depth map, just also to be transparent about what it can do and what it can't do. So let me bring this up. So for example, unlike the Flame one, it doesn't discern between different people. So we haven't yet got the ability to give me just one face and not the other. But just also, as this is like really not the most envious example with all the hair. So let me play that back. But I alluded earlier to that it's nice to have this node-based system inside of a node-based system, because what we can do now with this, because at the moment this is still like a binary mat, but what we can do is we can not frame fixer, sorry, can use mat refine to pull out a more grayscale mat. So this is by no means perfect, but it is definitely that you've got the possibility still with both machine learning tools, but also traditional tools to work on these before you actually leave Silhouette for Flame. So whenever that is applicable.
That's great. I've seen some really cool things from that mat refine, and obviously, as you said, it's not the secret solution to every mat problem, but it's another option in your tool chest to maybe get some extra detail out of it, which is very cool.
Exactly. And I think we're going to get to the example you talked about right about now. And that's this lovely lady over here. And anybody who's seen the demo I was able to give in New York or in Amsterdam knows this. And full disclaimer here, this shot demos really, really well. And not every shot like the one before does as well. But I always feel like it's good to show the potential of the tool. And this is how far it can get in certain circumstances. So let me open up Silhouette. And this time I want to work with a Mat Assist and create a project. So just a quick word about the workflow we use to generate AI mats is we've got one model which will basically figure out what you want to isolate on a single frame that is called maskml. And then we've got one model called metassistml, and that will propagate that through the length of the clip. So with this lady, we can do a couple of things to isolate her. The thing that I've already shown a couple of you is we can go in there, the machine learning model will load into the graphics card, and I can click and do that. So perfectly fine, got myself my object here, but I can also go in and use the rectangular choice, and this is pretty much like Automat works. I draw up a rectangle and I get my object isolated. Also a nice way to do this. But what's new in Silhouette 2025.5 is that I can also prompt this. So I can actually write in here person and let it detect objects. There we are. And this might not look too interesting now, the ability to prompt, but we'll get to some other examples where that's really nifty. And also think about the scriptability. Something that I can prompt down here, I can also put into a Python script and automate a lot of stuff. So that's why this is kind of cool. Okay, so as I said, on maskml itself, if we go to the second frame, no mat. If we go to mat assist, which is a different model, there you go. And you get your usual binary AI mat, which looks good, but not great. But then we can go in here and use mat refine ML. And let me put this on overlay view. And there we are. So this already looks better, but is still fighting the temporal inconsistency that we have so often. And this, once again, is where these guys come in. So I've got three different models here. I've got a sharper model, which is the default. I've got the softer model, marginally better, not great either. But with the video matting model, I get a higher focus in the model on temporal consistency. So you can see the hair detail is much better in this. It comes with a caveat that you'll need to pull out your junior compa skill of creating a core mat, but I think that's easily doable. And you can do that either here on the Silhouette side or just pipe that mat out and do it in the flame tools you like. That's no problem. So yeah, that's the basic idea on how our masking tools work. And if you like, I can show you that in a couple of other examples as well.
I'm always a big fan of this one. The detail is pretty incredible on the hair there.
Yeah, but as I said, it's not going to work as nicely on every shot. So don't take that big roto job just yet without.
We have one question that I'd like to ask you that I think I know the answer to, but Wiggs wants to know if you have the option to, like Mocha, select the specific layers on the output of Silhouette. It's no, right? It's just really just a matte output from Silhouette. Is that right?
So when you compare the standalone and the plugin version, there is sort of a difference. So if we call up the Silhouette interface once more, I've got an output node here. I can have multiple outputs, and these outputs, as you can see down here, can actually write out files. So yes, I can do that. And I could have 3 of those. I could use the multi-output to actually write out a multi-channel EXR. That's all possible. However, the streams that get fed to Flame are always RGBA of the last active output node, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's what I remember seeing as well. So okay.
So, but yeah, there is. I think when you compare the standalone and the plugin version, and Paul could maybe tell me if I'm right or wrong on that. I think the only limitation is when it comes to having Sapphire plugins inside of Silhouette. You can't do that in the plugin version because that would basically turn this like into a Matryoshka doll where you've got plugin inside of a plugin inside of a plugin. I think apart from that, the plugin version has the same feature set as the standalone. So should I continue to the next example?
Yeah, let's keep moving. There was a question about prompts and if there is some kind of
Oh,
list of.
we'll talk prompts.
Oh,
We'll
we're
talk
going
prompts.
prompts.
No
Okay,
problem.
let's get there.
So let's do this one. Okay, because what's also cool with prompts is that it does not just produce a single mat, but rather multiple objects. So let's get to the end of this one and call up a silhouette node, open it up, and we are going to do MetaSysML. Thank you very much. So said I wanted to go to the end, and I'm going to prompt for taxis. Objects. And I did go to the very end because there all of them were in frame and just gave me better result, but I got some false positives in there because those two guys are definitely not taxis. But there are two ways I can deal with this. First one is I could just delete those two guys out of my object list because I think, yeah, you can have as many as 50 objects in there, something like that. So I could delete those, but what I could also do is once again utilizing the Cryptomat, go in here and hook that up. Come on. And then just shift select the ones that I want. Come on. What am I doing wrong? Well, this is live, so
It's a live show.
it's a live show. This used to work. It will work in 5 minutes time. I tried that. You could pipe it into the Cryptomat and just select the ones that you like and forget about the others, which once again, when prompting, is a really nice way to do this. So you prompt for cars, and if the wrong one shows up, you can just deselect the false positives, which is kind of cool.
Very cool.
Okay, so, and then let's take another example. So this one, I just wanted to show how specific the prompts can get. So I've got this scene that our dear colleague Ben filmed in New York for us. And here we got the people on the promenade. And so I could maybe prompt for running people. So it detected a couple, well, if not all of them. But I could also go in here, let me undo that, and go to pink women. So it selects these two, which is kind of true. They both wear pink outfits. But if I go woman with pink shirt, it just selects the lady here.
There it is.
So that's quite cool. So, of course, like with all the ML tools, it depends on the footage, it depends on what you're specifically looking for, but you can get pretty detailed on these prompts. So it also can do comparable stuff. So you could, for example, let's clear this out again. Oops, I want to delete the node, just the object. Sorry about that. Like so. And tallest person.
That's really cool.
Okay, those two seem to be approximately the same height, but it didn't select these guys. So yeah, that's and as
Would you
you
say
can see,
there's a list of prompts, or is it really just like anything you can imagine? I guess that's a little too open ended, probably, but there's not a
well,
list, right?
I mean, I tried it out on a couple of these shots, so maybe Paul is the better person to ask that. But so far, for
There's
the
not
data,
there's not a list. It's an LLM. It's a small model, but there's not a list.
I see. So it's less that it's not a list. It's just it's understanding what you're writing. So it's not looking for a list of what you're writing. It just
Yeah,
understands it.
it's an AI or ML, and the idea that it understands, I think, is still questionable. I think we're getting there, but it's certainly semi-magical in the way that an LLM is. Yeah,
So it knows what tall means in this context.
yeah. Knows is also one of those kind of, does it really know? I don't know, but somehow it infers what you're asking for.
It has been
It's pretty
trained
good.
to give an output that's consistent with what we understand that tall is. Is that the way to describe it?
Yeah, yeah. I think we're delving a little bit into, the nature of how these things work, but it was trained on, thousands of objects, right? And then there's some inferences that it can do based on like color and size and foreground, background, things like that. But it's definitely not just a list. It understand. It
Yeah.
finds things way more frequently than you would think. It's good
Two,
at it.
two, two rapid questions maybe for you, Paul. Is it trained mostly on understanding people, or do you think it knows things as well?
It knows
Like,
things.
great.
Yeah.
And languages, multiple languages?
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a list of the languages that it has training data on, or if it's just.
That I don't have. We have a pretty large ML team at BorisFX, and they would definitely know. To us on the product teams, it's kind of like a black box. It's really fun to work with, but I don't know all the details about how it really works.
That makes sense. Would you happen to know if does the silhouette need an internet connection in order to
No,
process this? It's all offline.
it's all offline. Yeah, and
Okay,
as Christoph said, we train everything in house on our own material. So
great. Thank you. On with the demo.
all
Thank you
right.
for the lightning round.
This is one of my favorite new features in Silhouette, and that is SynthEyes integration. So let's take a look at that. So once again, whoever was in Amsterdam at my show knows this shot, and then I used um, the Mocha Pro plugin inside of Silhouette to track that shot. But I'm not going to do that this time, because I'm going to call up my 3D scene. And what I used to do was import an FBX into this. And you could perfectly do that. You could hit load 3D scene and bring something in from Mocha or from SynthEyes or from your external match mover or wherever you want. No problem. But as I said, we've got a condensed version of SynthEyes now inside of Silhouette. So what we can do, we can, for example, let's bump up the tracker length, or the tracker number, I should rather say, per frame. And let's make the maximum tracker count something like 800. And let's solve that. And yes, I know this is an easy shot, and this tracker is meant for easy trackable shots, but You can supply an occlusion mat if you've got moving objects in there, or if you want to exclude the sky, you can use MaskML to exclude those objects. Wouldn't be a problem. So you end up with your solved shot. It establishes a ground plane for you. Not totally correct, but for what we are going to do, this is perfectly fine. So what I can do now is switch to my point cloud and I'm going to zoom in here a little bit onto the yard. And I'm just going to select a bunch of trackers that I know are on the ground plane or on the ground. And if you look very closely, and maybe it's hard to see, but I'm going to zoom in a bit more, you're going to see these little green lines that give you an indication of the direction that Silhouette has established now. And that will come in handy once I switch to the card menu and draw up a card. And yes, it's not aligned perfectly, but we'll change that in a minute. So I've already got it pretty close to the ground. I'm just going to center it out on that used to be fountain in the middle of the courtyard here. And now the really cool thing about this, I like this really, really quite a lot, is that I can use that to stabilize and unproject my viewer. And
very cool.
Let me play that back, and that sits in there really tight. And I can now go in and do exactly the same things I did before, paint on that. But if I've got more complex work, or if I want to use patches, or if I want to apply effects, then I also have got an unproject node. So I would pipe my image in there. I would use the data input to tell it to use that card. Have to, of course, switch off my viewer for that. And now I've got that and can process this on like any other effect. So let's do something stupid here. Let's use a color correct on that. Just for illustration purposes. And then we can use a reproject. Pipe that in here. Get the 3D data. And I don't know, wait, what am I doing wrong? That one, yeah, right. And then we can do that. But that, of course, comes with filtering. So unlike what we did with Paint or Roto, where you can just apply the transform without any filtering steps in between, this would work like any other unproject, reproject workflow. But it's easy to set up, and that's quite nice. So also, I know this 3D system is not nearly where action is in regards to possibilities, but it's once you got used to it, it's really, really fast for these unproject, reproject workflows. And yeah, with SynthEyes built in there, you also get two options on how to do your 3D tracking inside of Flame, which I think is quite cool. Or actually, you get three, because you could still use the one version implemented in Mocha, where you could also use planar shapes to drive your 3D tracker. But I'm getting way off course here. So yeah, that's one, honestly, of my favorite features in Silhouette 2025.5. Do we have time for one or two more examples?
I think we do. And I love this one too, mostly because there's not a very easy way to do that inside of Flame. So it's pretty sweet to be able to unwrap like that.
Yeah. So
and it's if I can jump in, Christoph, real quick, just to clarify, I'm looking at some of the comments here. What Christoph was just showing, yes, is a double filter. But if you use the viewer stabilization instead, there's no, just like the very first demo he had, there's no change in filtering at all. And if you're painting, the painting as you paint is mapped onto that surface with no filtering loss at all. So that's the idea behind having the viewer integration. So you choose which way you want to use it.
Exactly. So just to to showcase this. So I've got my paint node hooked up here, and I'm not gonna make you sit through another bad retouch once more. So I'm just gonna, oh, I must, yeah, right. I must save the project because now I'm using a paint node. Remember, so 3D unproject, save. Okay, now I can paint away. Something. So there are my strokes, and I can select the card as my transform, can select match move, and there we go. And the occasional flickering is just the GUI updating. The paint result will be just fine.
And this is you demonstrating the no filter hit workflow for paint.
Exactly.
Excellent.
And it also works if you're in viewer stabilization mode and you're just painting with with it stabilized and locked down. It's the same zero filtering loss.
Very cool. While you switch to the next or maybe last demo, maybe Paul, do you happen to know if you're able to choose the type of filtering that you use when you do that filter hit?
No, there's no selection for it. It's an area sampler. It's really high quality. I don't know, Christoph, did we add a filter? Oh, okay, we do. Sorry about that.
Yeah, if we decide to go the filter route, we actually can pick our Gaussian, our Catmull ROM, our cubic, our triangle, bilinear, whatever works best on that particular footage.
Yeah, great. Sorry about that. Yeah.
But to be honest, I found that like 2 days ago, so
I forgot we added
it. So what do people? Maybe we should go for denoise, because I think it's a fast one, but at the same time
we'll end on denoise.
All right. So I'll show you there's not so much to show in regards to controls, because the machine learning model will basically do what traditional denoisers need, like profiling, analyzing the footage, analyzing RGB channels. That will be done by the ML model. So this is the footage before. I picked something very noisy because I know we're on a live stream and there's compression happening. So I'm gonna go really close in here, and that's the result. That's before, and also if we go to the hair, I know it's a little bit out of focus, but still we keep a lot of the detail. I think it's quite nice. And
this group, they're going to want to ask you about how it compares to Neat Video, of course.
Okay, honestly, I would say it's up to snuff. It's probably on very difficult shots. I think Neat Video gives you more granular control on how to attack that shot. But for the every day to day, I need to denoise my footage to properly work on it and then renoise it again with match grain. This works fine. So let me quickly just show you the UI, because I think the big advantage of this in regards to, or in comparison to Neat Video, is that you don't have to set up a profile each and every time, but you can just go in here and you select your model. So we've got, and this is what I talked about, we never want to break any existing models. So you can see all the older models that were already established for denoise ML, and our current version is 3.0, and we can choose if we've just got noise or compression and noise, and that's about it. And the rest is done under the hood by the AI ML model. And but this is really one thing I want to drive home is, as Paul mentioned, we've got a large ML team at BorisFX, and we try to integrate the technology in our different products. But what you've seen today will be the worst version of these tools that you've ever seen, because we really try to continuously iterate on them and improve them. And hopefully, you've seen a lot of version 1.0 today in these, but hopefully there will be version 2s and 3s sometime in the future.
That is excellent. We do have a question from GR Moore asking if you have a, what is that, 32-bit output option for
Sure.
Silhouette's denoise?
I think that should be possible. So as we can put out OpenEXR, so let's just try this.
Yeah, it does work. Silhouette, all the models we train on float material in scene linear, and Silhouette can render 32-bit float native as well as half float. So it just depends on the session settings.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to fake it just by changing the material to 32-bit float inside a flame before it enters Silhouette. And then let's call it up. And let's put this to 32-bit as well. And let's make it a composite. And let's pull up denoise ML. Of course, my poor MacBook is shouting at me for doing this, but
It's trying.
zoom in here. So let's pick compression. So yeah, it's doing its thing. And let's see what we get outputted. We could definitely at this point render out in EXR, yes, but let's just pick up the output of this. So this should be 32-bit. Any way I can check on that? Let's create a batch effect of this.
I see
Yeah, this
32-bit.
gets outputted as 32-bit float. So yeah.
Great. And there was one more question that I think I understand, but I'm not maybe 100% sure. But Jacob's asking the workflow for match grain over cleanup. But I'm not sure if it's more of a silhouette question or more of a workflow question of like, because I'm assuming if I'm understanding the question right, it's just, you would denoise, do the stabilization silhouette workflow, and then
I mean,
output that out of silhouette and then regrain with the match grain, which is
yeah, I mean, I've got a BFX of my rendered denoise here, so we can quickly do that for Jacob. Just gonna pull up a type tool. I've never touched the type tool, please forgive me. And just put something, add layer, and let's just write BorisFX loves flame. And let's make this really large so that we see it. Okay, we got that on our denoised background, and then we pick up the match grain. Okay, front. This is the degrain clip. This is the front. That is the original clip. And then we analyze. And now we've got noise on our comped image. So that would be the workflow. You would do your denoise, whether you use the built-in flame denoiser, whether you use Neat Video as an OpenFX or preferably Silhouette with the denoise ML. And then you do your comp on that, and then you feed those 3 inputs into match grain, and you should be a happy camper.
excellent.
You can also regrain inside Silhouette.
Sure.
Ooh, that's another option too. That's great.
It's all about options.
It's good to have options, isn't it? And I think that that might bring us to the end of our show here, and we're going to, because I haven't turned that effect off, we're drum rolling into our triptych view here. Amazing, wonderful demos, Christoph. Thank you for that, and thanks, Paul, for all the question answering on your end. I appreciate that. We have maybe a few more things to go over in the Q&A, and I think some questions that we've saved for that. So I'll see you two over there. But just have to say thank you so much for being here, and thanks for showing it, and thanks for your time today on Logic Live.
Pleasure. Always a pleasure to be on Logic Live.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot, Jeff.
Thank you. I'll see you over on Zoom in a couple minutes. But now we have made it to the end of the show. And congratulations to all of you who've made it this far. We're going to see who's walking away with an incredible... This is the menu that I wanted. Hello. Here we are. The prize wheel. So who is going to be walking away with a 1-year subscription to Silhouette standalone and plugin? Let's find out. Again, you must be here. So here we go. Shuffling the list. And you must be here to win. It is, oh my God, it's Mark Wellington. Are you still here with us, Mark? 1-year subscription to Silhouette to Mark Wellington. Are you in the house? I hope you are, because it's a wonderful prize. Looking for Mark Wellington. Well, Mark may or may not be here. We can move on to the next prize, and then we'll come back if yes or no. So the next prize that we're giving away is 1 month of... Oh, there he is. Mark is here. Congratulations. That's wonderful. So the next prize we're giving away is 1 month of Logic Academy Pro. Let's do a little shuffle here and see who's walking away with that one. Logic Academy Pro. None other than... Well, we can't have that. I thought it's supposed to remove the name. That's strange. Sorry. Let's try this again. The winner is Eric Lau. Congratulations, Eric, on 1 month of Logic Academy Pro. Congratulations. And finally, we have 1 month of BorisFX's suite. That's everything they own for 1 month. Shuffle that up. And the winner of a month of BorisFX is none other than Jacob Weiss. Congratulations, Jacob. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Congratulations to our winners here. Congrats. So what do we have at the... Oh, thanks, Eric. It was really just the grand big prize that you have to be here for. The other two, I'm glad you're here, but congratulations. You're walking away with that one. Coming up on Logic Live, nothing scheduled right now for next week, but the week following we'll be saying hello to, he's in the chat right now, the Prince of Particles, as Austin likes to call him, Sinan Viral, showing off a wonderful particle presentation I had the pleasure of watching at IBC. So if you are interested in particles, this is the show for you. The week after that, we have a presentation about one of the most interesting subjects in Flame, and that is advanced publishing when it comes to commercials and online conform. If you're into it, great, me too. And I can't wait to show you how I've been improving the connected conform workflow and the publishing workflow. And as always, before we go, I can't finish up without saying a big thank you to all the people who make this show happen. And that's our Patreon patrons. Big thank you to every person on this list right here. We are clocking in at 145 patrons as of this show. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you'd like to support what we're doing here and get access to things like the patrons Q&A chat that we do after just about every show, head over to patreon.com/LogicTV and support for as little as $5 a month. On Logic Academy Pro, we have the IBC 2025 Masterclasses available for free thanks to a sponsorship from LucidLink. If you were in attendance but you want to double check your notes, or if you weren't there and you want to listen in on a cool presentation by some of your Logic friends, feel free to log in over at logicacademypro.com and take a look. Again, these were made available for free thanks to our friends at LucidLink. We have a very active forum, forum.logic.tv. We have a Discord for hanging out and chatting. Logic Live has 2,650 subscribers on YouTube, so press that subscribe button so it's easy to find us. We have a merch store if you are merch inclined. BorisFX is a wonderful sponsor of Logic Live, very relevant today. And I think some people in the chat were talking about a Black Friday sale. I don't have information on that, but his history tells me that they typically do have a Black Friday sale. So maybe hold out on that. But if you can't wait and you want to save 15% on all their offerings, you can visit logic.tv/BorisFX and click on those affiliate links if you like deals and things like Silhouette, of course, or Mocha or Sapphire or SynthEyes. And that brings us to the end of today's show. Thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you to Christoph and Paul for being here on a Sunday. Extra thanks to Christoph because he is staying up late for us right now over in Germany. So Christoph and Paul will be joining us for one more hour over on Zoom for the patrons chat. So I'll see you two over there in just a minute. But for now, thanks again for being here, everyone. Thank you. I appreciate you. And I'll see you next time on Logic Live.